The Philadelphia Eagles didn't just win on Sunday, they made a statement that felt necessary, overdue, and cathartic for everyone who has lived through the weight of the last few weeks. Coming off a 3-game losing streak, this team walked into Lincoln Financial Field with pressure stacked on their shoulders and walked out having delivered a 31-0 shutout against the Las Vegas Raiders, a result that was dominant in every measurable phase of the game. This wasn't about surviving or escaping with a win. This was about control, confidence, and reminding everyone what this roster is capable of when things finally click. My friends, if you're riding with this team, let your voice be heard. Drop your thoughts in the comments about where your confidence level is right now and what you expect from the Eagles going forward. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button if this breakdown helped you, and keep watching because more Eagles coverage is coming up on the screen right now. From the opening drives, the tone was clear. The Eagles dictated the pace, owned time of possession, and never allowed the Raiders to find any kind of rhythm. Las Vegas finished with just 75 total yards of offense, a staggering number that underlines how suffocating Philadelphia's defense was throughout the afternoon. Kenny Pickett was under constant pressure, finishing 15 of 25 for only 64 yards and an interception that came when Zach Bond climbed the ladder and simply took the ball away. The Eagles recorded 4 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, 6 tackles for loss, and multiple passes defended, harassing the quarterback from start to finish and erasing any hope of a comeback before it could even begin. What stood out defensively wasn't just the statistics, but how many different players made an impact. Brandon Graham delivered 2 sacks while working inside, providing interior pressure that gave the Raiders' offensive line no answers. Nolan Smith, Moro Ojomo, and others consistently collapsed the pocket. Nakobe Dean continued his strong play with multiple tackles for loss, while the secondary stayed disciplined and physical, limiting Brock Bowers to just 6 catches for 28 yards. This was a complete defensive performance, the kind that reinforces the belief that this unit is championship caliber and capable of carrying the team when needed. Offensively, the story was just as important because this unit desperately needed a confidence boost. Jalen Hurts delivered arguably his cleanest and most efficient performance of the season, completing 12 of 15 passes for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns, finishing with a perfect passer rating. He was decisive, accurate, and composed, and the offense looked more modern and flexible in its approach. The adjustments that began to show signs of life in the previous game carried over, with more creativity in play design, movement in the pocket, designed quarterback runs, and a willingness to attack defenses in multiple ways instead of becoming predictable. The balance was noticeable. Saquon Barkley carried the ball 22 times for 78 yards and a touchdown, grinding out tough yards and keeping the offense on schedule. Tank Bigsby added meaningful contributions on the ground as well, reinforcing the commitment to the run game. While the offensive line may still have its limitations, the intent to stay balanced and persistent was clear, and that persistence paid off as the game wore on. Hurts also used his legs effectively, picking up key first downs and reminding everyone how dangerous he is when he embraces that part of his game. In the passing game, the ball was spread around, which has consistently been a hallmark of the Eagles at their best. Dallas Goedert led the way with 6 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns, repeatedly finding space and serving as a reliable safety valve. DeVonta Smith made the most of his opportunities, including a critical 44-yard catch that flipped field position. A.J. Brown still made his presence felt with a touchdown reception, but this offense didn't feel forced or one-dimensional.
It felt connected, efficient, and confident, something that had been missing during the losing streak. Situational football also swung heavily in Philadelphia's favor. The Eagles converted 10 of 13 third downs, controlled the ball for nearly 40 minutes, and finished drives instead of letting opportunities slip away. Even special teams played their role in maintaining momentum and field position, contributing to a performance that truly felt complete from start to finish. Yes, the opponent matters, and the Raiders are struggling. But context matters too. This Eagles team needed to dominate someone, to stack positive execution on top of the schematic progress that has been quietly building. They needed style points. They needed belief. They needed to see tangible proof that the adjustments being made can actually translate on the field. On Sunday, they got exactly that. With the final month of the season here and divisional games looming, this performance doesn't guarantee anything, but it does reframe the conversation. It shows a path forward. It shows what this team can look like when the offense plays clean football to complement a defense that already knows who it is. The question now isn't just about what happened against Las Vegas, but about whether this can be the foundation for something more consistent and sustainable as the pressure ramps up. So after watching this response, this shutout, and this level of execution on both sides of the ball, do you believe this win is the turning point that proves the Eagles are truly back? Or do you need to see it happen again before you buy in? The reason this performance matters so much is because it directly challenges the narrative that had started to take over around this team. After 3 straight losses, confidence was shaken, execution was sloppy, and every mistake felt amplified. This was a moment where the Eagles needed to prove something to themselves more than anyone else, and the way they played reflected a team that understood the urgency of where the season stands. This wasn't panic football. This was composed, intentional football, built on adjustments that were already forming and finally came together in a complete game. What stands out when you really break this down is how clearly the coaching staff leaned into what works best for this roster. There was no retreat into conservative play calling or an attempt to hide weaknesses. Instead, the offense embraced movement, creativity, and aggression. Jalen Hurts wasn't boxed into a static pocket passer role. He was allowed to be the dynamic weapon this team needs him to be, both within structure and when plays broke down. The design quarterback runs, the pocket movement, the use of RPO concepts, and the willingness to go under center at times all contributed to an offense that looked far less predictable and far more difficult to defend. That matters because this team's ceiling has always been tied to offensive versatility. When defenses have to account for every blade of grass, everything opens up. Running lanes become cleaner. Passing windows appear earlier. Tight ends and receivers find space underneath. Against the Raiders, that vision finally translated from theory into execution. Hurts looked comfortable, decisive, and in control, and that kind of performance has a ripple effect throughout the locker room. Quarterback confidence fuels belief across the entire roster, and you could feel that belief building as the game progressed. The run game, while not overwhelmingly dominant on a precary basis, did exactly what it needed to do. Saquon Barkley stayed committed, absorbed contact, and kept the chains moving. Tank Bigsby's involvement was especially important because it showed an effort to develop depth and maintain physicality over 4 quarters. This wasn't about chasing highlight runs. It was about wearing down a defense, staying balanced, and forcing the opposition to respect the ground game even when explosive plays weren't immediately there. That patience paid off, especially when paired with Hurts' ability to extend drives with his legs in critical moments. And then there's the defense, which continues to be the backbone of this team. Performances like this reinforce why so many frustrations earlier in the season were directed at the offense. This unit has been elite, consistent, and relentless. The pressure packages worked. The tackling was sharp. The coverage was disciplined. From the front line to the secondary, the Eagles played fast and physical, closing gaps, contesting throws, and finishing plays. When a defense holds an NFL opponent to 75 total yards and forces a shutout, that's not luck or matchup alone. That's execution at the highest level. This is also why the timing of this win matters. The schedule ahead isn't forgiving. Road games, division battles, and playoff caliber opponents are waiting. Momentum at this stage of the season isn't just emotional, it's functional. Teams that peak late are the teams no one wants to see in January. The Eagles don't need perfection. They need consistency. They need to stack performances that resemble this one, even if the margins are tighter against stronger competition. There's still work to be done. Questions remain about whether this offensive line can dominate week in and week out, and whether the offense can maintain this rhythm when defenses adjust. But for the first time in weeks, those questions feel like challenges to overcome rather than warning signs of collapse. This game provided proof of concept. It showed what this team looks like when adjustments are trusted, when players are put in positions to succeed, and when execution matches intention. Now it becomes about carrying this identity forward, about proving that this wasn't a one-week correction, but the start of a stretch where the Eagles play their best football when it matters most. The defense has already set the standard. The offense took a major step toward meeting it. If that continues, the conversation around this team shifts dramatically, from doubt and frustration to belief and expectation. Another layer to this win that shouldn't be overlooked is how it tested the mental toughness of this locker room. This season has not been smooth, and the last few weeks especially forced everyone associated with the Eagles to confront uncomfortable questions. When things started slipping, the concern wasn't just about scheme or stats, but about whether this group could absorb adversity without fracturing. What we saw against the Raiders was a team that responded instead of retreating. You could feel it in the body language, in the way players celebrated routine plays, in the sideline energy that hadn't been consistently present during the losing streak. That's important because football seasons rarely break teams physically first. They break them mentally. When confidence erodes, hesitation creeps in, and that half second of doubt is the difference between converting third downs and punting, between pressure and sacks, between wins and losses. Against Las Vegas, the Eagles played fast, and fast football almost always means confident football. Players trusted the call, trusted their teammates, and trusted that if they did their job, the result would follow. You also saw leadership show up in subtle but meaningful ways. Jalen Hurts didn't just play efficiently, he played assertively. He took what the defense gave him, protected the football, and didn't force hero ball when it wasn't necessary. That's growth. That's understanding game flow. On the defensive side, veterans like Brandon Graham set the tone early, reminding everyone that effort and violence up front can completely dictate how a game unfolds. Those are contagious moments, and they matter even more as the season tightens. This game also recentered the identity of the team. For weeks, the Eagles felt like a group searching for answers. On Sunday, they looked like a team that remembered who they are. Physical defense, balanced offense, discipline on third down, controlling the clock, winning in the trenches. None of that is flashy, but all of it is sustainable. That's the type of formula that travels, that holds up in hostile environments, and that gives you a chance in playoff football when conditions are far from perfect. Of course, belief alone doesn't win games in December and January. Execution does, and that's why the next step is so critical. The challenge now is not to let this become an emotional high point that fades as quickly as it arrived. The Eagles need to replicate the habits that led to this performance. Clean communication, smart play calling, commitment to balance, defensive aggression without losing discipline. Those are weekly requirements, not one-week achievements. The margin for error is shrinking. Every snap from here on out carries more weight. Opponents will study this tape and adjust. They'll try to take away the quarterback run game, force tighter windows, and test whether the Eagles can stay patient when the game isn't flowing as smoothly. That's where the real growth will be measured. Not in blowouts, but in how this team responds when things get uncomfortable again. What this win did was reopen the door. It reminded everyone that the Eagles' ceiling is still very real. It reminded the fan base why expectations were high in the first place. But potential only matters if it's realized repeatedly. The road ahead will decide whether this was the beginning of a late-season surge or simply a well-timed reset. Now it's on the Eagles to answer that question on the field, and on the fans to decide what they believe after seeing this response. Do you think this performance represents a true turning point for the season, or do you need to see this level of execution sustained against tougher opponents before you're convinced? One thing that keeps coming back when you replay this game in your head is how intentional everything felt. Nothing looked rushed, nothing looked desperate, and that alone separates this performance from some of the wins earlier in the season. This didn't feel like a team surviving off raw talent. It felt like a team executing a plan it actually believes in. That distinction matters, because belief is what allows players to stay disciplined when momentum inevitably swings the other way in future games. You could see that discipline in the way the Eagles handled success during the game. There was no let-up after scoring, no sloppy stretches where focus drifted. The offense continued to move the chains. The defense continued to swarm. Even with a comfortable lead, the standard didn't drop. That's a quiet sign of maturity, and it's something that championship-level teams develop over time. They don't play the scoreboard, they play the moment. This also felt like a reset in how the Eagles manage expectations internally. The outside noise has been loud, and in this market, it always is. But performances like this suggest the message inside the building is clear. Fix what's fixable, trust the process, and let the results speak. The adjustments on offense weren't random. They were built off previous film, previous mistakes, and previous weeks of frustration. Seeing them finally come together validates the work that's been happening behind the scenes. Another encouraging aspect is how complementary this team looked. The offense didn't put the defense in bad positions. The defense didn't force the offense to chase points. Special teams handled their responsibilities cleanly. That kind of synergy is what allows teams to stack wins late in the year. When one unit struggles, another can carry the load. Against the Raiders, no one needed to be rescued, and that balance is exactly what gives a team staying power. This game also served as a reminder that dominance doesn't always come from explosive plays alone. It comes from efficiency, from converting third downs, from winning time of possession, from eliminating mistakes. Those are controllable factors, and when a team locks into them, the floor rises dramatically. Even on days when things aren't clicking perfectly, those habits can keep you competitive. On days when they do click, you get performances like this. The question moving forward isn't about talent. That's already been answered. The question is about consistency and trust. Can the Eagles trust this version of the offense enough to keep leaning into it? Can Jalen Hurts continue to play free while still protecting the football? Can the run game remain patient even when early gains are modest? And can the defense maintain this level of intensity week after week as the stakes rise? This win doesn't erase the struggles that came before it, but it reframes them. It turns them into part of the story instead of the conclusion. It gives the Eagles a chance to define the final stretch of the season on their own terms instead of reacting to adversity. That opportunity is earned, not given, and Sunday felt like the first step toward claiming it. Now the responsibility shifts entirely to execution. The blueprint is there. The confidence is rebuilding. The margin for excuses is gone. What happens next will tell us everything about who this team really is when it matters most. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, this game also clarified something that had been blurry for weeks. The Eagles don't need to reinvent themselves to win. They just need to fully commit to who they are supposed to be. Too often during the losing streak, it felt like the team was caught between identities, unsure whether to lean on physicality, creativity, or pure talent. Against the Raiders, there was no hesitation. The identity was clear, and once that happened, everything else began to fall into place. This is especially important as the season reaches its most unforgiving stage. Late-season football is less about surprises and more about execution under pressure. Everyone knows what's coming. There are no secrets. The teams that survive are the ones that trust their structure and don't flinch when adversity shows up mid-game. What Sunday showed is that the Eagles still have that backbone. They didn't just respond to adversity after a rough stretch. They re-established standards. You could also see how this performance recalibrated urgency. The Eagles played with purpose, but not panic. There's a difference. Panic leads to mistakes. Purpose leads to precision. Every drive felt like it had intent. Every defensive series felt like it had an edge. That's the type of mindset that allows a team to carry momentum from week to week rather than letting it evaporate after one good performance. Another thing worth emphasizing is how this win strengthens belief heading into tougher matchups. Confidence in the NFL isn't built on hype. It's built on proof. This was proof that the adjustments work. Proof that Jalen Hurts can operate this offense efficiently when the structure supports him. Proof that the defense can dominate and set the tone regardless of opponent. That belief matters when games tighten up and margins shrink. But belief alone won't carry this team. The next step is discipline. The Eagles can't chase this performance. They have to replicate the habits that created it. That means continuing to value ball security, staying committed to balance even when it's uncomfortable, and trusting the defense to do its job instead of pressing for points. The formula doesn't change just because the opponent improves. This is where seasons are defined, not by how high the highs are, but by how steady the baseline becomes. If this game represents the baseline moving forward, then the Eagles are absolutely a team no one wants to face when the playoffs arrive. If it's just a spike, then the questions return quickly. That's the reality of December football. What makes this moment so compelling is that the answer is coming fast. There's no time for reflection, no time for comfort. Every snap from here on out either confirms progress or exposes regression. The Eagles have put themselves back in position to control their story.